Welcome to the Fanspeak Network. I'm your host, Megan Shoup. You can follow me on Twitter at Megs08DFS, and I'm joined by my brother Steve to talk Week 1 daily fantasy on DraftKings. You can follow Steve at SteveOSpeak. Steve, how are you doing? And are you already building some Week 1 lineups?
Doing good. Yeah, exciting to see the lineups out. We just had the Hall of Fame game. Football's back.
Football is back. It was a long off season for me. Each year, the off season gets longer and longer for me. So even when preseason's back, I get so excited. So I was also so excited and just thrilled when DraftKings released their Week 1 salaries about a little over a week ago. And you and I just started like digging through, already starting some research, writing, playing, obviously starting to build lineups. And we've both written a couple articles because we were so excited about the Week 1 article. So we thought, why don't we talk through these very, very early thoughts and analysis on Week 1? And believe me, we will have plenty more articles and content, plenty more shows that will dive way deeper on kind of why we feel this way about certain players or stacks or games. But this is just kind of our Week 1 overview thoughts. So why don't we go through my article first, and then you can kind of give me some feedback, and then vice versa, and we'll do it that way. So, Steve, I had written an article about kind of my favorite game stacks, kind of stands and to make offenses that I kind of really like that could be under-owned. And of course, the players that I'm willing to really spend up for and the players that I see as major values. So why don't I start there? We have the highest total on the slate is the Chiefs Cardinals. And while I absolutely see myself having exposure to that game, I can also see myself going to some other game stacks that could be a little lower owned. And actually, my favorite one that I think is going to be the highest owned of the high total games. And when, of course, when we say high total games, we're talking about the Vegas totals, what Vegas thinks the total will be. And of those high total games that are north of 48, there's only 3 or 4 games that are north of 48 points projected right now, right? So of those games, my actual favorite kind of hopefully under the radar stack is the Vikings Packers, set at about, I think, 48.5 right now. What do you think about that for kind of maybe an under the radar game stack?
So I like it for under the radar. I don't think people will be high on it with the Packers losing Devontae and MVS. Right. And while there's been a lot of buzz about the Vikings, I think everyone knows the Packers have a really good defense. I mean, in fact, they spent their 2 first-rounders not on receivers for Aaron Rodgers, but on defenders. So, right. I mean, Packers should have a good defense, but this is still a Vikings offense that even last year, when they were, a little bit more old school mentality, to put it nicely, they had a shootout with the Packers.
Right.
We all remember that. And, Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, adding KJ Osborne, Irv Smith, Dalvin Cook. I mean, there's firepower here, and they have an improving offensive line. So I think we absolutely could see a shootout, and that's what you need for the Packers. Like, the whole Packers problem with Aaron Rodgers is when they aren't pushed, Rodgers is not going to go off. But this is the type of situation where they could be pushed. So that's exactly on that side as well.
Right. And of course, from that side, I like, Lazard, but I really like Aaron Jones because I think when, there's not maybe as clear weapons as Rodgers had last year with Devontae Adams, we've seen that he will throw the ball a lot to Aaron Jones. So I think Aaron Jones really could be a big dual threat weapon. I think A.J. Dillon's going to get a lot of work on the ground still, but I think Aaron Jones will be a dual threat weapon. So I kind of like him because the way he's priced too, I could see him kind of being a kind of a forgotten man. And we always all know that Aaron Jones can, go off for 3 touchdowns in one game. I know I've seen it on the times I don't play him.
Yeah. No, and I think we just saw the Packers' final game against San Francisco in the playoffs. Basically, 2 guys got targeted. Devontae Adams, who's no longer here, and Aaron Jones.
Right.
And Aaron Jones was just absolutely destroying the 49ers defense. So he can do the same in this game. And, I just think, like you said, they're going to have to get him involved if the Packers offense is going to maintain that high level. And, Rodgers likes guys that he trusts.
Right.
Have some rookie receivers, and maybe one of them, a lot of buzz on Romeo Doubs in camp so far. But we're talking week 1 here. Week 15, 14, something like that, maybe Dubs is really locked in and
Right.
Rodgers' guy. But at the start of the year, I think guys like Lazard, Aaron Jones, Cobb, those could be the guys that Tunyon, if he's back healthy, and that's the other thing with Aaron Jones. Tunyon might not be healthy week 1, so that could also filter more to Aaron Jones.
Right. Yes, and that kind of leads me into kind of the next segment that I talked about in that kind of very week 1 early analysis is offenses I want to be early on, because I think one point I want to make, and I'll continue kind of beating this drum throughout August and leading up to the start of the season is, those first few weeks in daily fantasy, and especially week 1, those are the weeks I've honestly done the best. And the reason why is because we don't really have this year's data points to go off. We think we know, but we don't necessarily know. And so we don't have this year's data. And so, people will have strong stands and, there will be players that are very high owned. And believe me, if I think it's good chalk, I will be on it. But I think week 1 and early in the season is where you can be more contrarian, fade the public in places that you don't necessarily agree with, or you don't agree with the data, or you don't agree with the kind of the opinions. And those are the weeks to make strong stands. And that has benefited me very well in the past years. If I look at my Roto tracker, the month of September is usually the month that I've done the best. And I'm hoping it is going to be that way for this year too. So the offenses I'm high on that I'm going to make some early stands on are the Vikings. We've got Kevin O'Connell coming over from the Rams. He did, obviously what he did with Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp and that offense was incredible. But there's a lot of other kind of little statistics that I mentioned in the article. Vikings had one of the worst third down rates in the league, while the Rams had one of the better third down rates of the league. So if you're not getting off the field, you're staying on the field. That means you're getting more offensive stats, which is just fantasy goodness. So I really like what Kevin O'Connell can do. He's also rumored, and talked about, Justin Jefferson said it himself, that this isn't a run first team anymore. And we'll see if that actually comes to be. But the thought is that this could be a more pass happy team. So what do you think about that and being early on the Vikings with Kevin Connell as a coach with, again, all the weapons that Kirk Cousins has?
Yeah, I think people love to knock Kirk Cousins, but the guy produces, especially on a per snap, per attempt basis. He's been extremely consistent, basically since he took over the Washington job in 2015 on that level. Now, some years, particularly with the Vikings, some of those first couple of years, he didn't get as many attempts as you would want. But last year, his attempts were pretty strong, a lot of times because the Vikings were behind. This time it could even go higher just because their tempo should be higher, their pace should be higher, and just their overall strategy. They're going to come out firing. The other thing that we'd see with Kirk Cousins in the last couple of years is sometimes they would get off to a good start and he'd have 240 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns, and then they just stop throwing.
Right.
I don't think that's going to be the case. I mean, sure, if it's a total blowout, but
right.
But I think Kevin O'Connell knows. He's a former quarterback. He's with the Patriots, so he learned from under Tom Brady. Went to Washington, actually worked a little with Kirk Cousins in Washington, and then
they have some history
beyond. And then, obviously with the Rams and the Sean McVay tree, they're not necessarily the most aggressive passing tree, but they go out there. They want to have a strong passing attack, and when you have weapons like this, Justin Jefferson is maybe the best receiver in the league. I mean, there's a couple other guys who are in the mix, but he is that talented. He's that good. And Adam Thielen, this guy missed, a third of the year last year, and he was still a very strong fantasy season because he had double-digit touchdowns. So the weapons are there. Cousins is a good quarterback, and I think Kevin O'Connell is exactly what this team needed.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And that's why I've been so bullish on the Vikings in future markets. On week 1, I'm going to be very overweight, as we can tell. Let me touch on some of the other offenses I kind of want to be kind of overweight on. I really like the Dolphins. And, another new coach coming. That's a brilliant offensive mind in Mike McDaniel. I cannot wait to see what he does with Tua and now Tyreek Hill and all the weapons they have. So I want to be early on the Dolphins. They are matching up against the Patriots week 1, which I know sometimes you get nervous. Oh, who's Bill Belichick going to take away? But I want to be early on the Dolphins. And I also, and this one may have some scratching heads, I want to be early on the Panthers. Christian McCaffrey's back. He's a dual threat weapon. He's a guy who's a threat to double bonus and rack up a ton of catches, and just he is a guy on DraftKings that can get you 40, 50 points. He does that, has that absolutely in his range of outcomes. So if he is the Christian McCaffrey of 2019, or even the flashes we saw when he did play in 20 and 21, unfortunately only played 10 games, 2020 and 2021, but even in those 10 games, he flashed that CMC upside. So, I love Christian McCaffrey. I actually think Baker was just injured last year, and that's why his stats were so down. I think he could have a bounce back season. And if he could get his stats back to kind of what they were in 2020 with the Browns, I think that's very functional to support Christian McCaffrey, especially DJ Moore, and even Robbie Anderson. So, those are the teams I kind of want to be early on. And I don't know, but outside of Christian McCaffrey, if people are going to be as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, and I'm very high on Christian McCaffrey. He was my, we'll get to my article later, but he was my high price running back that I'm targeting. And it's for what you said. I think he had 6 games last year of 10 or more carries. I mean, we're talking a very low bar here. And in 4 of those, he had 24.5 points or more.
Yeah.
He's just so talented. And that was with Sam Darnold. That was with Cam Newton and PJ. The
right.
play was just horrendous. The offensive line was okay, but it's gotten better. They added their top pick there.
And they added 2 guys in free agency. I was just writing an article about the Panthers last night. There are 3 new starters on the offensive line.
Yeah, the offensive line could be at least average, if not a strength.
Right.
And quarterback play just has to be better. Has to be much worse than it has been these last couple of years for McCaffrey. So you just put that together, and he's not the highest price guy. I mean, I think people will look at Jonathan Taylor, even Derrick Henry in their juicy matchups. You got guys like Eckler, Cook. I mean, plenty of top running backs that everyone will like. So I just don't see McCaffrey getting steamed and having a major ownership. In fact, of the top 6 guys, he might be the 4th or 5th lowest owned. So
that's interesting because I love it. Then I'm all in.
Yeah.
And DJ Moore. I mean, this guy has been Mr. Consistent, over 1,100 yards the past 3 seasons with, as you said, very subpar quarterback play. Even if Baker doesn't have to go out and, have an MVP season. He just has to go out and be a really functional quarterback. If he's, like I said, anywhere near the 2020 Baker Mayfield with the Browns, then he's really going to support the receivers for the Panthers. And that means DJ Moore. DJ Moore has somehow only had 4 touchdowns each of the last 3 years. That number's got to go up. So
yeah. I mean, he should at least have 8 this year, if not more.
Right. Exactly.
With his level of targets and catches, even though he's not your big red zone threat, he's going to get more touchdowns. It's just there's no way if he stays healthy, he's having under 8 this year. That's I think he's another guy, and the targets were there for him last year. It was just there were a lot of bad targets. And
exactly.
Just even a average, above average quarterback play, and he could just have a monster year. So, the Browns defense can be good, but they've lost some pieces, and that organization right now is just obviously going through a lot. Who knows how they step off on the field when they get and I like the fact that it's in Carolina.
So. Right. Agreed. Well, I mean, we could go on and on. I could talk about this all day, but I want to get to your article too. So, go through my article. I talked about, again, kind of making those stands early. Offense, we just talked about the offenses I like, some stacks I was interested in. I also talked about some spend up plays and values, but we're going to kind of talk about that in your article. I also wrote another article with my week 1 first look. So check out both of my full week one articles. But now let's get to your articles, Steve. And you broke it down. So let's go kind of position by position and kind of talk about your targets and fades within each. And again, you're probably only going to highlight one because you have many more within the article. So check out both of Steve's articles. He breaks down each position at each price point and gives, multiple players that he likes and doesn't like as much. So be sure to check out both of those articles. So let's start with the quarterback position, Steve. Who are your kind of top targets and fades?
So for quarterback, I break it down each position: a high price, medium price, and a low price guy.
Right.
I'll give you just my high and medium price both come from the same game. So it's the quarterbacks from the second highest scoring game on the slate,
right.
And that's the Chargers Raiders.
Yep.
I just think naturally their ownership is going to be less than the Mahomes Murray from the highest scoring game. And you two guys who are just absolutely high powered offenses, I think we're going to see shootout after shootout in the AFC West this year.
Agreed.
This is going to be the one from the jump that we see. So I just love both of them. I love them. I mean, Carr, obviously at 5,900 could be a massive discount compared to if his production is as high as we think. A guy, he gets Darren Waller back, gets Devontae Adams. The only thing that hurt him last year was his touchdown rate was really low. His completion percentage was strong. His yard was good. It was his touchdown rate because Hunter Renfrow was his touchdown maker last year. Well, guess what? You get Darren Waller back, you get Devontae Adams, and you have Josh McDaniels now calling you plays. So compared to the just mess that they had last year with all the coaching issues they had. So absolutely love Derek Carr. The fade, I'll give you my fade in the medium range as well, and it's Justin Fields. Justin Fields could be dynasty-wise, long-term talent. Sky's the limit, but right now it's rough in Chicago. I mean, there was a report today that the offense coordinator basically said, we don't know what our starting offensive line is going to look like. That's not a good thing. We're not talking about one or two positions that are up for grabs. Basically, they have at least four positions up for grabs along their offensive line. And this is, again, not like what we just talked about Carolina, where they brought in some free agents or added a first-round pick or a high-round pick. Chicago, that's not the case. They did not bring in any big-name free agents. In fact, they lost free agents. They did not bring in a top draft pick. In fact, their second-round pick from a year ago, Tevin Jenkins, might not be on this team. He's not practicing right now. So this is a complete mess. Fields doesn't even have a ton of weapons. There'll be some weeks where you'll want to play Justin Fields, but he's playing the 49ers. You just see Bosa and those types of guys just going wild in this type of game. So, I'm all out on Justin Fields.
Yeah. Okay, well then now let's move over to the running back position. Who are your top targets and fades there? And again, there's many more in the article, and we have much more to talk about, but give us a little preview.
I'll give you my mid-tier ones in this one as well. And target is what I just talked about, the Bears versus 49ers. I mean, this could be just a dominating performance by the 49ers defense against the Bears offense that just seems unprepared right now, under-talented and unprepared. So I want Elijah Mitchell. I mean, it sounds like, he's the 49ers number one back. Deebo Samuel is probably not running near as much as he was a year ago. Yes, Trey Lance could steal some rushing, but we know Kyle Shanahan and running backs. If you find the right guy, that's what I want. And Elijah Mitchell's only priced at $5,400. I know it's DraftKings and he doesn't catch a lot of balls, but I mean, we could be talking 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, pretty easy in this type of game.
Right.
So I just love him at that price. I mean, he doesn't even have to come close to those numbers to pay off this price. And my fade is in that same range. Saquon Barkley, 6,100. I know he's a favorite person in off-season talk and bounce back and new offense and all that. Excuse me, sorry about that. And they are a team that invests in their offensive line, so I give the Giants credit, but you're still talking about Daniel Jones leading this offense, and Tennessee was extremely good against the run last year. It's likely going to be a slow-paced game because Tennessee's going to run the football, so I just don't see a ton of opportunities for Saquon Barkley in this week one game, and I just think he's a little overpriced at 6,100. If that's $700 difference between Elijah Mitchell. There's other running backs in between that I would take over Barkley. So for me, it's really tough to pay up for Barkley when if you go a little higher, you can get a stud. like an Aaron Jones, like you talked about before. I think
Mm-hmm.
he's 6,700. Or if you go lower, you're getting a guy like Elijah Mitchell. So
Mm-hmm.
Barkley's just in a bad price range for this type of matchup.
Okay. Now let's obviously move over to the receiver position. Give me a target and fade there.
So my target, I will give you my mid-tier target and my high-tier fade. My mid-tier target
Okay.
is Michael Pittman Jr.
Love it.
This Colts offense gets an upgraded quarterback with Matt Ryan. They've talked about wanting to be a bit more balanced and not rely on Jonathan Taylor so much this year. And Matt Ryan, he just dealt with a mess last year with the Falcons. He's got a much better offensive line. Michael Pittman Jr. is his number one target. This is a guy who's going to get like 10 targets a minimum per game, and he could have 12, 15. Facing off against the Texans defense that just is not that good. They get Derek Stingley Jr., but I just think it's going to be a welcome to the NFL type of moment for a guy like Pittman, who's an exceptional route runner and can just do it all. So I think at 5,500, he is just grossly underpriced. For his expected role. I mean, he's coming off a good year. It's not like this is totally out of the blue.
Right.
For my fade, a $6,400 AJ Brown. He goes from Tennessee and the highly accurate play of Ryan Tannehill to Jalen Hurts. Lowest passing volume offense in the league last year. Jalen Hurts was extremely inaccurate. It's not a great fit. And then the fact that it's the Lions, Eagles should be very much a run first team. I think most people considering their defense think they'll be ahead in this game, and probably a low scoring game. So I just don't like AJ Brown, and this is my point. I mean, you're paying $900 more for AJ Brown than Michael Pittman Jr. That just doesn't make sense. I mean, AJ Brown went from being the true alpha in Tennessee a year ago. Now he's got Devonta Smith there. He's got Dallas Goedert. There's a lot of good players for the limited targets that are going.
Well, you kind of touched on best ball and Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts, unless something drastically changes from his efficiency and accuracy and the amount they throw, that would be very hard for him to carry three receivers, carry them, from a fantasy perspective. So sure, there's going to be games where one pops off here and, but it's hard to, know when that'll be. And, you and I do, I think, feel differently than the market about Jalen Hurts and maybe how high of a ceiling he has in that Eagles offense. And we'll talk more about that in future articles and episodes. But you make a great point that just the game flow and his accuracy issues week one, is that really the week to target him, especially if he's coming with high ownership, because a lot of best ball and draft biases tend to carry into week one.
I fully expect his ownership to be pretty high because, I think the $64 price tag's way too high on him, especially when you're looking at guys below him like Amon-Ra St. Brown in that same game, just on the other side, or Marquise Brown, T. Higgins, DJ Moore that we talked about.
Yep.
I don't want all these guys above him, but people will look at him, and from a raw talent, AJ Brown is an elite receiver.
Absolutely.
It's just a bad spot. Like if he had gone, like Marquise Brown went from a lower volume passing off last year, was higher, but generally speaking, lower volume Ravens passing offense to a high volume Cardinals offense. So that's a boon. AJ Brown, it low volume but high efficient in Tennessee to low volume and low efficiency in Philly with more competition is just not a recipe for success.
Right. Agreed. Again, we'll have a lot more to say on that. Let's wrap up these targets and fades and talk about your target and fade for the tight end position.
So, I'll give you my medium target and fade for both. My target is Zach Ertz. The Arizona Cardinals, we just talked about, it's the highest scoring game. You have Kyler Murray. Zach Ertz really took off when you went with Kyler Murray last year. Some of those games without DeAndre Hopkins, some with. But we know Hopkins won't be there. He's suspended. Right. They still have A.J. Green. They did get Marquise Brown to kind of replace Christian Kirk. But, Zach Ertz should be the guy. And, yes, they drafted Trey McBride, but rookie tight end. They don't do a lot early on. typically speaking. So I have no fear of that. And also Chase Edmonds is gone. James Conner will handle a chunk of the passing work, but they don't even have their best passing back from a year ago. So I'm all on board on Zach Ertz, and he's 4,500.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking 2,300 less than the highest priced tight end, Mark Andrews. We're talking 2,100 less than the other tight end in this game, Travis Kelce. And I'm guessing his ownership won't be as high as it should be. I mean, even in best ball, he's going as like tight end 10 or 11, even though, you know, if you extrapolate his Cardinals numbers over the course of a full season, he would have been like tight end 5 last year. So,
right. That's a great point.
So, you know, I just think there could be value. I mean, there's definitely value in the price and opportunity, and maybe even in ownership. And we'll obviously see what the buzz is as we get closer. But I love that. And on the fade side, Pat Freiermuth. I like Pat Freiermuth. He's a good tight end. This is not a great matchup. You know, it's the first week of the new quarterback time. Likely Mitch Trubisky. Could be Mason Rudolph. Who knows? You know, there's every day it sounds like another one of those Steelers quarterback is in the driver's seat. Either way, I just think this is a bad matchup. The Bengals have extremely athletic linebackers, guys like Logan Wilson, you know, top tight ends like Jesse Bates. You know, like they just drafted a tight end or drafted a safety. These guys, Jesse Bates, Logan Wilson, these safeties and linebackers can match up and take away tight ends. And I also think, you know, Steelers added more receivers in the draft, like George Pickens. So there might just not be as many targets for Freiermuth on a week-to-week basis. Anyways, at 4,200, it's just, you know, you're paying $300 more for Ertz. There's a few tight ends lower that I would take easily over Freiermuth. So I just think it's a bad matchup, bad spot. So just kind of a fade for me for Freiermuth.
Sure.
And the one thing I will say, and this kind of goes across the board in most positions, is nobody is overpriced because it's week one.
Yeah, it's soft pricing for sure.
It's very soft pricing. So even the top of the tight end market, you know, Kelce and Andrews, 6,800, 6,600, Kyle Pitts, Waller, all those types of guys, whether you like them or not, you know, you make that call, but none of them are as high as they probably will be 5-6 weeks into the season.
Exactly. That's why there does feel like a lot of values, you know, to start the season. Well, we're going to save defenses and let people read your article, check out your defenses, and check out, you had plenty more at each price point of targets and fades. So again, check out both of Steve's week one articles. Check out both my week one articles of very early analysis and my very first lineup. Steve, any last thoughts on week one? For now, because we are going to have so many more shows to break down week one.
Well, I think just keep an eye on how some of these positional battles go on. You know, these prices are done well beforehand. A lot of rookies, some are stepping up, some injury concerns. We don't know, but just keep an eye because, you know, that's what makes a lot of this pricing soft to begin with. So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, start building your own week one lineups and, you know, check out our articles. And again, stay tuned to fanspeak.com for plenty more week one content throughout the month of August and early September. And we are going to have plenty more week one shows leading up to the start of the season because we are so excited. Before you get out of here, please be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Fanspeak Network. We're just getting going. And like I said, we have plenty more content coming. Also, I know this episode was all about daily fantasy, but we have been talking a lot of best ball. Don't forget to play best ball and go to Underdog Fantasy. Use code Fanspeak and get that deposit bonus up to $100, 100% deposit bonus with code Fanspeak. So go out there, play some best ball, make some week one lineups, and we'll see you next time.